Hey there! Before we start the podcast, I need you to put down that wavebird and listen up.
I need money.
For a tenth of what the price of that wireless GameCube controller costs,
That should be like $5 if you got it off Shop Goodwill.
you can support me here at the podcast of Two Consoles Too Late.
I need to buy more games.
Your support gets bonus content like additional episodes, Discord server access, typewriter manifestos, and personal shoutouts on the airwaves.
I actually have a typewriter.
So I've decided to make the Patreon free, so all those bonus podcasts and typewriter manifestos, you can have them for free. But if you do support this podcast monetarily, I still will send you a signed postcard, a signed trading card, a Miracle of Save States magnet, and a shout out on the airwaves. Anyway, let's get back to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the Two Consoles Too Late podcast. I'm the host, Jackson Keebler, and I am Two Consoles Too Late. On this episode, we're taking a look at Samus Returns for the 3DS, the remake of Metroid 2, The Return of Samus. Also, I'm going to do an update here at the podcast, what's coming up and what's been happening. And also, we got a trailer for Season 2 of Fallout that looks really good. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get started. So it's been a while since the last podcast. And for that, I'm sorry, but I try to do these episodes every 2 weeks, but it has been 3 weeks since the last podcast, and a lot's been happening. My son just turned 10, and we went on vacation to Ocean City. So I tried to make up for the lack of podcast with Instagram posts. So be sure to head on over to the Instagram at Two Consoles Too Late. Lots of little goodies over there. But I'm here now, so let's talk about Samus Returns. So I substituted the solution fanfare from Breath of the Wild with the get item acquisition jingle from Samus Returns, and I just realized that they're basically the same. Let's hear them back to back real quick before we start talking about Samus Returns. All right, here is Breath of the Wild. All right, and now here's Samus Returns. I mean, I don't have musical notation, but they sound exactly the same. I'm pretty sure I could have put both of those little ditties into ChatGPT or some sort of AI program and gotten the musical notation just to see how similar they are. But I'm not going to do that because that's too much work, and AI is evil. Skynet is real. And while I joke, I actually do believe that. I recently had a delivery to a giant construction site in Western Maryland. And I asked the foreman, whoever the guy was, I said, what are you guys building here? And they said, oh, it's a data center. I said, well, what's the data center for? They're like, oh, it's for Amazon. So they can basically track your data. All right. I actually think that, AI is going to take over and it's making people lazy. And I try to avoid it as much as possible. Self-admittedly, I've used ChatGPT to put together outlines and scripts for this podcast, but more and more it's just becoming evil. So once again, to AI, I have to say, stick it. All right, so before I start talking about Metroid Samus Returns, a disclaimer, a caveat, if you will. Metroid Samus Returns is a remake of Metroid 2, The Return of Samus on the Game Boy. All right, and I find myself once again sort of scratching my head when it comes to remake, remaster, what have you. I was thinking about doing a side-by-side comparison of Samus Returns with the Game Boy original, but I decided just to talk about Samus Returns on its own, as its own game, because it is its own game. It is informed by the original on the Game Boy. Much of the gameplay comes from the original for the Game Boy, but much has been added, and we're going to talk all about that. So I was going to do a side-by-side comparison. I thought, no, what, forget it. If you want something like that, go to the YouTubes and find someone, I'm sure, who has done a video. I did not view any of them. So for the sake of this podcast, I am only talking about Samus Returns. A post came across my Facebook feed from 5 years ago while I was on vacation. And from 5 years ago, I posted that I was playing Metroid Samus Returns and that it was quote-unquote kicking my ass. I just thought that was really serendipitous that 5 years ago I was actually playing this game for the first time. And I ended up putting it down. Now that I have played Metroid Dread, I have come to love that game. And this game was developed by the same developer, Mercury. So going back and playing Samus Returns was a little bit easier this time, having played Dread, of course. But this was the last of the 2D Metroids for me. So it was a little bittersweet because until Metroid Dread 2 or Super Metroid Dread, whatever they're going to call it, because that'll be the next 2D Metroid, because there's none left. I played them all. So this was the last one. And it was a joy. And it still kicked my ass. The reason I put down Samus Returns, I guess, 5 years ago was it was a little difficult, and I couldn't get used to the parry function, the parry abilities, the Aeon abilities, and I didn't like 3D. When I originally played this game, I actually had a 3DS, and I found myself turning off the 3D function. I always thought and think that 3D is a gimmick. I mean, just look at like 3D TVs. I mean, it's a fad, and it just kind of comes and goes. So I did not like Samus Returns 5 years ago, but here it is 5 years later, and I sat down and played it, and I was quite pleased. So in 2017, Mercury comes along and remakes the original Metroid 2, The Return of Samus, for the 3DS. And they changed a few things, but at its core, it's a Metroid game, so some things could not change. So we have all your typical Metroid stuff. You have the power beam, the charge beam, the ice beam, the wave beam, the plasma beam, the spacer beam, and the grapple beam. You have missiles and super missiles, and we have power bombs, space jump, screw attack, high jump boots. And from Metroid 2, The Return of Samus, we have the Spider Ball, which was a staple of that game, and this one, the ability to go into Morph Ball and to climb walls. But added was the parry ability, the ability to block enemies, and the Aeon abilities. And the 4 Aeon abilities of Metroid Samus Returns are the Scan Pulse, the Rapid Fire, the Lightning Armor, and the Phase Drift. The Scan Pulse, basically you hit a button and it maps out your surrounding area. Much helped my gameplay because it showed you where all the pickups were, which I thought was kind of cheap, but at the same time, it did help. That made its return in Metroid Dread. The Rapid Fire, that was much needed against certain enemies. Some enemies you just couldn't kill with the power beam, so you needed that Rapid Fire Aeon ability. And the Lightning Armor. The Lightning Armor surrounds you with like a field of electricity, lightning, whatever, and allowed you to go through, I don't know what they were, like poisonous weeds. Some sort of weed that like caused damage when you touched it. But if you had the Lightning Armor, that didn't happen. And then you had the Phase Drift, which slowed down time and allowed you to access certain areas. A lot of pickups were unattainable without the Phase Drift. In Samus Returns, just like in the original, you have to destroy 40 Metroids in total. And as you destroy the Metroids, the acid on the planet SR388 goes down. And the different Metroids that you are facing, just like the original, are the Alpha Metroid, the Gamma Metroid, the Zeta Metroid, the Omega Metroid, and finally, of course, the Queen Metroid. But one of the features of Metroid Samus Returns that was added, that was much needed, was the in-game map. But the screen of the 2DS was so small that it became hard to distinguish which doors were which in the in-game map key, which segues me into my experience of playing Metroid Samus Returns on a handheld. I've said before here on the podcast, but I'll say it again, I'm not a big fan of handheld gaming. And this is going to be old man ranting, get off my lawn, but this is two consoles too late. You can head on over to the Instagrams. I posted that I had picked up a 2DS specifically for the purpose of playing Metroid Samus Returns. I wanted the 2DS because I did not want the 3D feature, and I did not want to sink a whole bunch of money into a 3DS XL, but I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So this, of course, when I'm playing a handheld game, I wear headphones, and I have to say that the sound of the game was awesome, especially through headphones. However, I don't think my wife likes this because when I'm wearing headphones, I can't hear her. So there's a little bit of frustration there. The graphics of Metroid Samus Returns were awesome. But once again, that screen is just too small. So I put together a list of screen sizes just to kind of put things in perspective. The screen size of the Nintendo 2DS is 3.5 inches. Now, the screen size of the Switch, the original Switch, not Bob, the Switch screen size is 6.2 inches, so pretty much double. The screen size of the 3DS XL is 4.88 inches. But once again, a 3DS XL runs about $200 and above. And that above is if you're getting like a limited edition, like the Galaxy 3DS XL. There's a whole bunch out there. So at that price point, you're basically just buying a Switch. The Game Boy Advance SP, one of my favorite handhelds of handheld gaming, the screen size of the Advance SP is only 2.9 inches. And that's a big reason why I got a Game Boy player for my GameCube back in the day, so that I could play handheld games on a screen, because I just can't do handheld gaming. I just can't. And that screen being so small, I had to wear reading glasses in order to see the screen clearly. So right there, I'm wearing headphones and reading glasses just to play Metroid Samus Returns. That was the limitations that I experienced. And being a handheld, you were at the mercy of the battery. Now, a full charge on my Nintendo 2DS allowed me to play for 3 hours until I got the blinking red light that the 2DS needed to be charged, which for me was perfect, because in that 2 to 3 hours, I could get enough progression that I could put it down and then come back to it the next night. But I was at the mercy of that battery. But once again, a full charge allowed me just to play for about 3 hours at a time. Anything more, I think, would have been kind of overdoing it. But you cannot stream any footage from the 2DS, 3DS. I went on the YouTube to see how it could be done, and you have to get a 3DS XL that's been modded with a capture card in order to do that, which is something I'm not going to invest in. That, and I really don't stream that much anymore. Every Monday and Friday, I'm like, I say I'm going to stream, but I just never do. It's just the ordeal of setting up the green screen and, depending on what I'm playing, can it be streamed? So the ability to stream any footage from a 2DS, 3DS is limited. But the form factor of my 2DS was awkward, and it made it a strain to use the left and right shoulder buttons. Now, I want to specify that the form factor of the 2DS made it difficult to hit that L and R buttons, because I don't really remember that much of a strain on a 3DS. I wish I kind of known that going into getting a 2DS. Maybe I would have spent a little bit extra for a 3DS, but the form factor was really bad. The ergonomics, I found myself struggling greatly. The D-pad of the 2DS, that little circular, I guess it's not an analog stick, an analog pad. It just felt flimsy. And the rubber covering on my D-pad was starting, I wouldn't say it was starting to come off, but there's a crack in the rubber. So I have to see about possibly getting that replaced. My thumb physically hurt during the final boss fight of Metroid Samus Returns. So playing a game on a handheld, there was a lot of limitations, but once again, those limitations are mine and mine alone here at Two Consoles Too Late. So let's get back to talking about Metroid Samus Returns. Now, being a seasoned Metroid game player, I was expecting certain things. I was expecting there to be speed boost puzzles, and I knew at some point some things were unattainable because I did not have power bombs. There were no speed boost puzzles because there was no speed booster in Samus Returns. The reason I thought there was going to be speed boost puzzles is because in certain rooms there's like little ramps, and in previous Metroid games those ramps were part of speed boost puzzles, but there was no speed boost in Metroid Samus Returns. There was a power bomb boost, and I didn't realize it till late in the game because certain pickups couldn't be attained without. Basically, you go into Morph Ball, use the Spider Ball, you get on a wall, you drop a power bomb, and it shoots you across the room horizontally, not vertically. So I didn't know that that was a thing until I had to go to the YouTube and see how to pick up a certain missile. And apparently that was a thing. There is an ice beam in Metroid Samus Returns, but it is its own separate beam. Much like Metroid Dread, ice missiles were a separate thing. I believe that, yeah, they needed to be... Did they need to be toggled? I can't remember. Anyway, so the ice beam was its own thing. And early on, using the ice beam, you could get certain pickups by freezing enemies and jumping on them and access certain areas. But mostly, once again, the ice beam in a Metroid game is used to freeze the Metroids, then kill them with a super missile. That's been ever since the beginning of Metroid. So the ice beam does not stack. It is its own separate thing. But as I was playing Metroid Samus Returns, there was the lava areas. And this is something that was added that was not in the original. These areas required the Varia suit, much like any Metroid game. And whenever you entered these hot areas, the Magmorth Caverns theme would start playing. Dun 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 bum 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 dun dun dun. I'm sorry that was so bad, but if you know the theme, you know. So as I was going into these lava areas that required the Varia suit, I thought, okay, I think eventually I'm going to have to face Kraid because that's what happened in Metroid Dread. So I was expecting a Kraid fight. Kraid was not in Metroid Samus Returns, spoiler alert, but guess who was? After completing the game, at the end was Ridley. Oh man, I was so disappointed because as you approach the ship, you have 100%, that's it. You got the baby Metroid. Who shows up? Ridley. Ugh. Ridley was not in the original Metroid 2. And adding Ridley at the end, to me, just felt kind of cheap. And I have to admit that it took me, I think, the better part of 2 nights to finally defeat Ridley. It's an easy boss fight, but once again, the form factor of the 2DS, my thumb was physically strained pressing that D-pad. And that was, once again, my experience. And by that point, I was just kind of fed up and just kind of wanted the whole thing to be over. I was expecting my first playthrough of Metroid Samus Returns to be a long one. Anytime I play a Metroid game for the first time, of course I want to do 100% completion because I'm a completionist. But I like to give myself an out because I like to fully explore. I like to backtrack when I get certain things. So I knew going into playing Metroid Samus Returns that my playthrough time was going to be long. My original playthrough of Metroid Dread was 24 hours in-game time. And as I was playing Metroid Samus Returns, I felt that that Samus Samus Returns was as big as Metroid Dread. There were 7 different areas. Speed run records for Metroid Samus Returns. An any percent run was at 1 hour 13 minutes, and a 100% run was at 2 hours and 4 minutes. My personal times, and once again, you can see this over at the Instagrams, I got a 100% completion, and it took me 18 hours and 39 minutes. Once again, I did lots of exploration and lots of backtracking. But one of the added features of Metroid Samus Returns was a boss called Diggernaut. And Diggernaut is a giant robot that digs through the rock of SR388. I guess Mercury's team felt that they had to add to the challenge and gameplay of Metroid Samus Returns. Diggernaut, of course, was not in the original Metroid 2. There is a chase sequence with Diggernaut, and at the end of that chase sequence, you get finally the power bombs. To defeat Diggernaut, I had to go to the YouTubes to see the patterns therein. I tried to do it cold, but I just couldn't do it. I needed those YouTubes. But Diggernaut was a fun little boss. It incorporated the spider ball, and I guess it was like a blade puzzle. You had to jump out of the way of laser beams and blades and whatnot. So Diggernaut was a fun little added feature. And, of course, at the end, we have the Queen Metroid. But the Queen Metroid had a few added features that I haven't played Metroid Dread. I totally understood where they came from. The boss in Metroid Dread, experiment number 39 or whatever number it was, does this thing where it blows you against a wall of fire or lava. And the Queen Metroid did the same thing. And to avoid going into the wall of fire, you had to go into Morph Ball and use your spider ball to stick to the ground and not get blown into the wall of fire. So that was another area where I saw that Mercury took a feature from Samus Returns and brought it into Dread. There was so much about Metroid Samus Returns that I saw come back in Dread. And having played Dread first really helped me play Samus Returns. The Aeon abilities of Dread are different, but at the core, pretty much the same. And parrying the enemies got added pickups. And when you parried a boss in Metroid Samus Returns, it led to a 3D cutscene where you would just rush the boss with missiles or whatever you were firing with. And then once again, like I said, Ridley added at the end, kind of cheap, not too difficult, but I just felt that it just didn't need to be added. At that point, once again, I was sort of, ready for the game to be over. One thing that Metroid Samus Returns did have was in-game music. That's very different from the original Metroid, which basically had the opening theme of SR388, and that was about it. But there is musical ditties in Samus Returns. And while I did not like the music of Dread, I did not like the music of Samus Returns. None of the tunes were memorable, except for the surface theme of SR388, which got wonderfully remixed, and here it is. Please enjoy. I have to apologize. The website that I download video game music from, sometimes the tracks get a little, splotchy, and there's like little ticks in there that you can hear. So for that, I'm sorry. But one of the funny things I think about that theme is that while it is awesome, it did not get included on the Samus Archives CD that came with the special edition of Metroid Samus Returns. Because copies of Metroid Samus Returns, not an expensive game. Complete in box, price chart in has it around $30. The special edition is $62.50, and that's with the Samus Archives CD. There was a PAL Legacy Edition that included the copy of the game for the 3DS with a steelbook case designed like a Game Boy cartridge, a download code for the original Metroid 2 game, a 40-page art book with both new and retro art, and the Samus Archives CD, once again. Gold S logo pin badge, and a Morph Ball 3D keyring. That was a collector's edition that was only available in Europe. So we're going to take a look over on Auction Alert at what we can find for Metroid Samus Returns.
Auction alert.
So currently a search for Metroid on the shop Goodwills. A copy of Metroid Samus Returns does not come up. But one did recently sell. I actually had my eye on this one. It came up just as I was bidding on one on eBay, and that's where I got my copy. This auction ended. A copy of Metroid Samus Returns for the 3DS. It got 4 bids and sold for $25, and that came from the Goodwill of Colorado. But once again, a copy of Samus Returns is not available on the shop Goodwills. Another sold listing, though, I found was the Samus Archives CD. A copy of that CD sold from the Goodwill of the Columbia. It sold for $12. It only got 2 bids. Doesn't look to be in too bad a shape. I got my copy of the Samus Archives from Shop Goodwill back in the day, and I don't think I paid much more than $12. So while there is not a copy of Samus Returns available on the Shop Goodwills, sometimes copies do become available. There's also been some sold listings on the Shop Goodwills I just wanted to highlight from previous podcast episodes, not pertaining to Metroid Samus Returns. Another copy of Earthbound, it looks like it was complete in box, came on the Shop Goodwills. That sold for $1,862.99. Looks like it actually got paid for because it's not back on the Shop Goodwills. A copy of Metroid, the original Metroid for the NES, graded. It got a grade of from CGC 8.0. Not very good, I think, but that sold for $600. And a copy of Vagrant Story for the PlayStation. I did an episode on that game. A copy of that sold for $151. So I think that's a little bit higher than what it normally is. So there's lots of good stuff to be had on the Shop Goodwills. If you do want a copy of Samus Returns, just got to keep an eye out, do a save search, and every once in a while they come up. I didn't check any 3DS game lots to see if they got included. But once again, Metroid Samus Returns, you're coming in around $30. But in summation, what was my experience with Metroid Samus Returns? It was nothing but good. There's just this moment in every Metroid game, at least this has been my experience, it's around the time that you get the gravity suit. And at that point, you have this sense of possibility, that the game is, the end is close, but so much more of the game is opened up to you. And this has happened to me in every Metroid game I've ever played, whether it was Prime, Fusion, Super Metroid. Every time I get this little bit of joy and this little bit of elation once I reach the gravity suit. So I greatly enjoyed Samus Returns. I knew that I was going to like it. However, Samus Returns is not going to make my top 5 of Metroid games, and it's simply because it is on a handheld. And once again, I went over my foibles of me and handheld gaming. Now, if I could have used a controller and played Samus Returns on a big screen, then maybe this would be in the top 5. Sadly, it's being usurped by Metroid Dread. But for me, the replayability of the game is limited because it is on a handheld. And the only time I do handheld gaming is usually when I'm on a plane or on vacation. But I would like to go back and play Samus Returns once again, bring that completion time of 18 hours down to about 8 to 10 hours. But if you have played Metroid, this is a wonderful addition to the franchise. If you've never played Metroid, I would start with Dread and then maybe go back and play Samus Returns. But this is like I said, a wonderful addition to the franchise. You don't have to know a lot about Metroid. It's a little bit different from the other games because the dynamic of you have to kill 40 Metroids and make that acid level go down. That was something that started way back when with Metroid 2: The Return of Samus. And this game, Samus Returns, has been wonderfully remade, as we heard a wonderful remix of the Surface theme. I highly recommend Samus Returns. A couple of weeks ago, I was guest host with Anthony on the Retro Gamers podcast, and we talked about video game movies and series. And one of those series that we talked about was Fallout. And we just got a trailer for season 2 of Fallout, and it looks really good, and I think it looks better than season 1. It looks like in season 2 that Lucy is on the hunt for her father. And spoiler alert, at the end of season 1 of Fallout, it looks like her father goes to New Vegas. We get some more backstory on Cooper Howard, a.k.a. Ghoul, played by Walton Goggins. A wonderful actor. I think this is his real breakout role, although he's been in numerous things. Once again, Anthony and we talked about this on his podcast. Check it out over at Retro Gamers Podcast. I definitely want to pick up a copy of Fallout New Vegas before this season 2 drops, just to kind of get a feel for what's going on. It's one of those games I've been looking for quite some time, and the last copy I came across was a sealed copy at the North Point Flea Market, and the guy wanted $30, which is what it was worth, but I'm not spending $30 on that game. So I'm definitely going to have to get a copy of New Vegas before season 2 drops out, but definitely check it out. A little spoiler in the trailer. The gun that Lucy uses at the end of the trailer is the Volkssturmgewehr, which my German's a little rusty, but Volks means people, Sturm means storm, and Gewehr means war. I don't know. I don't know what the actual translation of that gun is. But anyway, she's got this gun, the Volkssturmgewehr, and when she shoots it, it slows down like it does in the game to like the VATS, V-A-T-S. So for all you Fallout geeks, there's a little something in there for you. So Fallout Season 2 looks like it's dropping in December. So an update here at the podcast, why I have not been podcasting. It's been 3 weeks since the last episode, and I've been replacing Instagram content with podcast content. So be sure to check out the Instagram at 2consoles2late. Over there, you will see multiple pictures. One picture is of my sealed copy I acquired of Metroid Other M. I'm sending that off to Wata Games to get graded. I'm actually going to keep this one. It's going to be a display piece for my non-existent shelf collection. I have no intention of selling it. All being said and done, after my experience with Mario Kart, my next graded game experience should go smoothly. What have I been playing? I've been playing Shadow Man for the Dreamcast. I'm not too far into it, but I'm really enjoying that, and I don't want to talk too much about that. So the next episode, I'm guessing, is going to be about Shadow Man. For my son's birthday, I got him a copy of Super Mario 3D All-Stars. I got it because he liked Odyssey so much, I thought he'd like the other 3D titles, but he hasn't really touched it since he got it. It's because he got something else I'm going to talk about later. So Mario 64, a game I've never played and I've heard so much about. That is definitely on the radar. And another Dreamcast game I've gotten but I haven't played yet is Silver. Looks to be a little fantasy action RPG. So I'm excited to play that. So I got a lot of games and a lot of episodes in the mix. But I have been, unfortunately, buying a lot of games and not playing a lot of games. And I have to wonder if my buying of games is some sort of substitute endorphin release. And I'm actually thinking about doing a episode on video game addiction. So that's kind of in the works in my head. But I've been buying a lot of games, and I've been buying a lot of PlayStation long box games. I'm up to 5 long box games so far. I've spent about, I haven't done the math, but it's about $150. Once again, go back and listen to the episode where I talk about PlayStation long box games. The full collection is about $6,000, something like that. So I am putting a hiatus on buying games. I don't need any more games. That's it. At the beginning of the podcast, once again, everything on the Patreon is now free. Bonus podcasts, typewriter manifestos, any other content I put up there, it's all free. But if you do support this podcast monetarily, once again, I will send you a signed postcard, a Miracle of Save States magnet, and a shout out here on the podcast. And one more thing that's been acquired here at 2 Consoles Too Late. I'm still 2 Consoles Too Late. For my son's birthday, we got him Switch 2, and that was an experience. I had to do what I'm calling a data orgy, where you put the 2 Switches next to each other so that all the save data from Switch 1 goes to Switch 2. Check that out on the Instagrams. And I got a lot of comments on that post. And it took an hour and a half to download Mario Kart World. And to me, that just seemed very strange. So to Nintendo, I have to say,
stick it
for all this downloading. But hey, that's modern gaming these days. But not here at 2 Consoles Too Late. We're going to stick with the retro stuff where you just plugged it in and played it and enjoyed it, or possibly did not enjoy it. But that all being said, thank you for listening to the podcast. Check out that Instagram content and check out my guest host appearance over at the Retro Gamers Podcast. I'm going to get out of here and go play some Shadow Man on the Dreamcast. But as always, have a good one. I love you, and goodbye. Now, once I do why can't I say that? All right, a couple caveats and disclaimers here at the podcast before I start talking about Metroid 2. See, I just did it again. Damn it.